United States.
The Economist, May 18th to May 24th, 2013. In the United States section, Barack Obama and the presidency, W's apprentice. The Justice Department versus Associated Press. Look who's talking. Lexington, on notes on 3 scandals. And more.
United States.
Barack Obama and the presidency. W's apprentice. The president's use of executive orders, many of them with praiseworthy aims, will end unhappily for his party. When Congress refuses to act, I have an obligation as president to do what I can without them, Barack Obama said last year. It is a duty he has discharged with vigour and creativity. Since the Republicans won control of the House of Representatives in 2010, Mr. Obama has found many ways to circumvent their desires on immigration, climate change and appointments, often testing the limits of his authority under the Constitution in the process. With control of government still divided, and with time running out for the president to cement his legacy, the next few years will see much more of it. Already this year, Mr. Obama has issued a series of directives trying to strengthen the system of background checks on those who buy guns. After Congress blocked the administration's attempt to close loopholes on sales online and at gun shows, he has instructed all federal law enforcement agencies to coordinate more closely to improve the database that the checks rely on. The Department of Justice is offering $20 million in grants to encourage states to submit more information to the database. Mr. Obama has ordered the Consumer Product Safety Commission to examine the effectiveness of gun locks and safes, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a public health agency, to start looking into the causes of gun violence. These are small steps, but in other areas the law gives Mr. Obama more leeway. The Clean Air Act, for example, allows the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, to regulate emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases from power stations. The EPA has drafted regulations restricting emissions from new plants and will begin work shortly on existing ones too. Another decree from Mr. Obama's regulators is cutting emissions by sharply raising fuel efficiency standards for cars and trucks. Taken together, such measures could have a similar impact to the climate change bills that Congress has balked at in recent years. Similarly, last year Mr. Obama instructed authorities to stop deporting dreamers, illegal immigrants brought to America as children with otherwise blameless records, and to issue them with work permits, even though bills with a similar effect had foundered in Congress. John Podesta, the White House Chief of Staff at a time when Bill Clinton was grappling with divided government, predicts that this administration will find ever more creative ways to circumvent Congress over the next few years. Once you start doing it, you like it, he says. Another attempt to evade Congress's strictures earned Mr. Obama a rebuke from the courts in January. When Congress is not in session, the President has the power to make appointments that would normally require the Senate's approval. So when Republican objections left his nominees for various government posts in limbo, he pushed them through via recess appointments, even though the Senate was not technically in recess. The administration argued that the minute-long sessions the Senate was holding every few days precisely to prevent any such appointments did not constitute genuine parliamentary business. A lower court disagreed. The case is now before the Supreme Court. Mr. Obama has occasionally resorted to a tactic favoured by his predecessor George W. Bush that enraged the left and earned criticism from Mr. Obama himself when he was running for president. The signing statement, a sort of declaration of principles issued when a president signs a bill into law. Although these have been around since the early 19th century, Mr. Bush used them like a line-item veto, identifying portions of laws he did not intend to enforce. Mr. Obama has done the same, albeit far less often, arguing that Congress has no right to tell him what to do with the prisoners America is holding at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, for instance. Mr. Obama's administration has also mimicked Mr. Bush's refusal to hand over documents to congressional investigators on the grounds that the internal deliberations of the executive branch are privileged. It is thought to have drafted at least one secret Bush-like memo awarding the president sweeping powers in the war on terror. Eric Holder, the Attorney General, has asserted that under certain circumstances the government, without any sort of judicial process, has the right to assassinate American citizens plotting attacks against their own country, even though Mr. Obama as a candidate was unwilling to countenance detaining or wiretapping such people without a judge's approval. In fact, argues Mark Rozelle of George Mason University, the difference between Mr. Obama's view of the president's powers and Mr. Bush's is largely rhetorical. Mr. Bush, along with his Vice President Dick Cheney, made explicit their desire to restore to the presidency the clout they felt it had lost in the 1970s after the Watergate scandal. Mr. Obama, meanwhile, speaks of respect for constitutional niceties. Larry Tribe, a former professor of Mr. Obama's and a subsequent legal advisor, considers this unfair. The president did push Congress, he notes, to give defendants more rights in the military tribunals Mr. Bush originally set up by executive order, and has continued to enforce laws he finds objectionable, such as the Defense of Marriage Act, which bars the federal government from recognizing gay marriage. Increasingly, however, the exigencies of office seem to be trumping the legal qualms of the campaign trail, something Mr. Obama's supporters will regret when a future Republican president perfects the dodges he is pioneering.
United States.
The Justice Department and the Associated Press. Look who's talking. The administration seems to have trampled on press freedom.
When the authorities want to obtain journalists' phone records as part of an investigation into a crime, the Department of Justice's guidelines state that their request should be as narrowly drawn as possible. What is more, they should try to persuade the journalists concerned to hand over the records voluntarily, unless doing so is likely to undermine the investigation. So it came as some surprise to the Associated Press, or AP, a news agency, to discover officials from the Justice Department had quietly obtained records of more than 20 phone lines used by its journalists in New York, Washington and Hartford, Connecticut. AP condemned the seizure as unjustifiably sweeping. All manner of people who might have wanted to keep their contact with the press secret will have been caught in this dragnet. Others might now hesitate to speak to reporters. That concern is not far-fetched. Under Barack Obama's watch, the government has indicted 6 officials for leaking secrets under a law called the Espionage Act, which had only previously been invoked against government officials 3 times since it became law in 1917. The scrutiny of AP seems to relate to an article published last year detailing the foiling of a plot to blow up a passenger jet. The FBI had already said it was investigating the leak of details of that operation. The telephone records at issue included the work, home and mobile numbers of journalists who had worked on the article. The official who approved the subpoena of the phone records insists proper procedures were followed and due consideration given to press freedom. But neither he nor anyone else has given any inkling of why such a broad and secretive approach was necessary. Mr. Obama claims to support a bill to spare journalists from having to disclose their sources. The administration, critics point out, is not averse to leaks that suit it. The president, for example, has spoken about America's drone strikes against suspected terrorists, but in court, officials refuse even to acknowledge the program's existence. Eric Holder, the Attorney General, said the crime being investigated at AP put the American people at risk. Yet John Brennan, at the time Mr. Obama's chief advisor on terrorism, told Congress there was never any danger to the American people from the plot revealed by the AP. The Justice Department's sudden interest in journalists' phone records, of course, will make such inconsistencies harder to probe.
United States.
Democrats in Texas. The waiting is the hardest part. Julian Castro cruised to a third mayoral victory. What comes next? Officially, the mayoralty of San Antonio, like many other municipal offices in Texas, is non-partisan. But last year, San Antonio's mayor, Julian Castro, displayed his colours on the nation's big political stage by giving the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention. Like most political keynotes, Mr. Castro's was an utterly unmemorable torrent of boilerplate. He took brave stands in favour of education, family, America and hard work. Still, Mr. Castro feared the speech would hurt him at the polls. Republicans in San Antonio would either stay at home or pull the lever for one of his opponents. And he may well have been right. On May 11th, Mr. Castro won re-election with 66.5% of the vote, a healthy total to be sure, but well short of his 2011 showing of 81.4%. His victory was a foregone conclusion. If Mr. Castro had any election posters in downtown San Antonio, they were well hidden. On the day before voters headed to the polls, he was not pounding the pavement looking for hands to shake and voters to corral. Instead, Mr. Castro was in his office, looking and sounding relaxed. San Antonio mayors serve 2-year terms and are limited to 4 of them. Mr. Castro's victory on Saturday thus marks the halfway point of his presumptive tenure in office. Graham Weston, the head of Rackspace, a cloud computing and web hosting company based in San Antonio, calls Mr. Castro's tenure a magic moment in our history. And indeed, San Antonio, America's 7th largest city, is in rude health. Its population is growing swiftly and its median age is 34, compared with a national average of 37. Since 2008, its unemployment rate has remained consistently well below the national average. It is now an enviable 6%. San Antonio holds AAA ratings from all 3 major ratings agencies. In May 2012, voters approved the city's largest ever bond offering, allowing San Antonio to spend $596 million on infrastructure improvements without raising taxes. 6 months later, voters approved a sales tax hike of 1/8 cent to fund full-day preschool for 3,700 4-year-old San Antonians each year. And so, with more time behind him in office than in front of him, many have started wondering not just what next, but how high. Though Mr. Castro says he is just happy to be part of a city on the rise and in no hurry to move on, not all Democrats in Texas share his calm. Some have pressed him to abandon the mayoralty and run for governor next year. He has declined. Though Democrats fare well in big Texan cities, statewide races have proved tougher. The last Democrat to win a gubernatorial race was Ann Richards in 1990. But by 2018, the demographic shifts that make Texan Democrats salivate, the explosive growth of the Latino vote, and some say a right turn by Texas Republicans that has seeded the political centre, will have had more time to progress. Though the current governor, Rick Perry, may seem vulnerable, in a poll published in March, 36% of respondents said they would vote against him, compared with 26% who planned to vote for him. He is a skilled political fighter and will likely prove a formidable opponent. In 2018, he will be 68 years old and seeking a 5th term, while Mr. Castro will be a fresh face at 44. Sometimes the route to higher office involves knowing the right time to seek it.
United States.
Nevada's economy. Silver dollars. A fast-changing state leaves its mining roots behind.
Tim Dyer scrambles atop a mound of land in the lonely Nevada desert. That's where the pit mine will be, he says, pointing towards a bland expanse of scrub. Turning his gaze to an area of desert indistinguishable from the first, he identifies the site for waste storage. A processing facility will occupy a third plot. It is an impressive feat of visualization. Of course, he chuckles, Las Vegas used to be like this before they screwed it up. Mr. Dyer's firm, Nevada Copper, hopes to build an open pit mine near Yerington, a depressed town in the northwest of the state, though Congress must first approve the transfer of 10,000 acres of federal land. He bears no animus towards Las Vegas, a 6-hour drive away, but the transformation of Nevada and the dizzying growth of its largest city helps explain why mining companies are feeling the political heat. Nevada's north, where mining is concentrated, was eclipsed by Las Vegas and the South 50 years ago. Today, mining is Nevada's 9th biggest industry, but it remains at the core of the Silver State's identity and has been singled out for special treatment since its 1864 founding. Nevada's constitution enshrines a tax on the net proceeds, i.e. after operating expenses, of mineral sales. Since 1989, it has been capped at 5%. Several Republican legislators have called for the cap to be removed and for the rate to be doubled. Democrats want to raise the payroll tax and to apply a uniquely high rate to mining. Any or all of these proposals may be put before voters in 2014. The target is on our back, says Tim Crowley of the Nevada Mining Association. The 2008 crash hit Nevada hard and recovery has been slow. Unemployment at 9.7% is the highest in the nation, as it has been for most of the past 3 years. Public spending has been slashed. Yet thanks to the strength of gold, which accounts for most of the sector, mining has flourished. The price has slipped lately, but remains high. Earnings in October 2012 were almost 50% higher than in the late 2009 trough. It makes for a tempting target. But there are deeper reasons for the shift. Nevada has urbanized and diversified as it has grown. An influx of Californians and Latinos, mainly to Greater Las Vegas, has pulled the state away from its rural mining roots and brought an end to the era of Republican dominance. Almost 3/4 of Nevadans live in Clark County, home to Las Vegas. Leave the lights of the Strip behind, and Las Vegas is a hot desert sprawl, much like Phoenix, Arizona. Such changes are not unusual in America's West, but Nevada is an extreme example. Net migration accounted for 3/4 of population growth between 1990 and 2010, a period when the state was expanding faster than any other. Hispanics grew from 10% of the population to 27%. Those deserts are lonelier than ever. Nevada is now America's 3rd most urbanized state, after California and New Jersey. The newcomers have little use for Nevada's low-tax, low-services model. In particular, the pro-rural education funding formula, designed in 1967, is showing its age. Schools in Clark County are underfunded and their results poor. Southerners have long moaned that too many of their tax dollars, derived mainly from gaming and tourism, flow north. Around half the mining tax proceeds go to local counties rather than the state's general fund. The converse is not true of gaming. Politics in Nevada has struggled to keep up with demographics. The first Southern governor was not elected until 1982, but urban legislators are now flexing their muscles. Many current tax proposals earmark funds for schools. Republicans elected in the Tea Party wave of 2010 now talk of the urgent need for fresh revenues. The miners would prefer a broadening of the tax base. Nevada taxes neither individual nor corporate income. Half its revenues come from gaming, which pays taxes on gross proceeds. But, says Lou Shack of Barrick, which operates 5 gold mines in Nevada, the folks on the other side are not as receptive as they once were.